All the sons around the United States promise to do their best to make their fathers proud. Me, on Brad Stine Has Issues, my son running the show, has promised me that everything is going to work this day after Father's Day celebration. It's going to work like a well-oiled machine. There will be no problems.
I said it would run. I didn't say no problems.
There will be no glitches, saith my son. He said there'll be no glitches. Everything will be exactly how we had hoped it would be. Everything that we had dreamt about when we first wanted to make a podcast is going to...
Keep going.
Here's the deal. I thought you guys were happy that Father's Day was here, that my son was behind the camera, and he's running the show. And so on this special day after Father's Day celebration, we've got a special guest, we've got special fun, and everything. It's a see what happens, folks, when you have a son. Everything goes haywire. This is God's Comic Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues, as usual. And this is my song. Why, hello, my name is Brad Stine. You might know me as God's Comic. This is Brad Stine Has Issues, a special podcast where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. I'm the father, yesterday was Father's Day, and behind the camera, in that special booth, in a place that you will never see, a face you will never gleam upon, is my son who issued from my loins, Wyatt Leroy Stine. Wyatt, how are you? And happy day after Father's Day. How was Lowe's?
Well, funny story about that.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Have you ever seen those blue machines that we used to go up high?
Yes, the things that crank you way up, they go like this.
Well, not a sizzle lift, but close.
Okay.
So I was on one of them the other day.
You? Yeah. Why, you're frightened of heights, son.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
Okay.
So I was like 8 feet in the air helping a customer get something.
Lord have mercy.
And then the battery died.
What? And you were trapped like a rat 8 feet high?
Yeah, for like 20 minutes.
Oh, if only you had Link's floatable paraglider thing deal.
The funny thing, though,
to escape.
Was because I had to wait, obviously, and we were still open, I just spent the entire 20 minutes looking down on people and asking if they needed help.
You know what you could have done? You could have sold birthday parties.
No, it was funny because eventually the customer I was getting it for showed up to see what took me so long.
Oh, my goodness.
I was like, oh, hey, so anything else I can help you with?
I'm trapped. And you didn't call anybody? Lowe's doesn't have to spend walkie-talkies?
I called someone the moment it happened.
And they just laughed and said, hey, we're understaffed. So good luck, Wyatt.
No, it's just that's how long it took for them to get the heavy machinery to get me down.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's not a happy Father's Day. But I had a wonderful Father's Day. First off, my daughter couldn't go to church, and she has got my son-in-law and my 4 grandsons. And she couldn't go because the couple of boys were sick. And this is what happens when you have children. They're sick on a regular basis, Wyatt. It's not my fault. I had nothing to do with it. I believe in helping the children get better, giving them, honey and cumin and all the things that your mother assures you will fix her. Meanwhile, you're still coughing and she's in bed, sick.
I'm sorry. Did you just say cumin is a herbal remedy for sickness?
I think so.
Isn't that a spice that you use for like tacos and stuff?
Yes.
What on earth kind of disease or allergy could cumin possibly cure?
I don't know. What does thyme cure?
All wounds.
Well, listen, I got to tell you something. We have...
Oh, come on, that one's a good one.
That was very good, and if you'd been cool and let me just gloss over it, then it makes it even funnier to the audience.
It's so real for you to give me any, satisfaction for these jokes, man.
You know who's watching?
Nicholas.
Yeah, he's right up on front. You know, Nick probably, here's what I found out, and here's what must be the case for St. Nick. Here's what happened. He's not the first one on, Wyatt. He never leaves. He just stays on for 7 days, so he just automatically pops back up. It's like putting it on pause, and then here we go, and there's Nick just sitting there. Oh, you guys, yes, thanks. I was happy. I was taking a nap, woke up, here we go, and I'm first in line. That man is good. You know who else is here? Marcia Pointer Reed, good evening, Brad and White, and everybody. Brad Markell, just think if Brad Stein didn't have issues. If I didn't have issues, we wouldn't have a show. What is it with Brad always making these snide remarks, not realizing that it's the very issues that make our issues issue-worthy, son?
Well, I mean, I think it's the fact that if we were just called Brad Stine Has, people would just leave.
Yes.
I would leave if that was the case.
Oh, unless it was Brad Stein Has Cumin.
No, then I just leave coughing.
Listen, Sean Syriac. Hey, Brad and White. Hope you guys had a good week. Beth Franklin, love from Kentucky. Thanks. Gianna Sizemore, you are fine. Nick Kress, no problems, just issues, right. Rebecca Daly Dwyer, hell from Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. She gave us like a unicorn and a purple heart and a sparkly heart and prayers and faces of laughter. Ashley Haas, happy Father's Day. Thank you, Ashley. I wish you had said that yesterday because you know White didn't tell me happy Father's Day until 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He literally forgot. And don't say you didn't, son. You forgot it was Father's Day.
I didn't forget it was Father's Day. I just forgot to tell you.
Let's see. Clovis Jones. Hi, everyone. Andy Jones from Wayne, Michigan. Paula Faye Marie Rouchy. Who is she?
Lady with names.
Our favorite...
Four-named lady.
Four-named lady. Yeah. Let me think here else. We got Rebecca Days. Happy Father's Day! And she's screaming it. Dusty Wilhelm, hello, friends. Karen Boyd finally brings up the rear. Hey, Brad. Hey, White. Hey, all. Let's see. Barbara McDuvall. Hi, Brad and White. Carrie Tudor had to look you up to see if live. Hi, glad you happy belated Father's Day. Anybody else popped in? I don't want to leave them hanging. Hey, it's Nicholas Blake. Hello from hot Florida. Nicholas, I got trapped 20 feet up in a freezer for a few hours. They forgot about me. Aw, that's funny. He got stuck 20 feet up in a freezer, and they forgot about him. In a freezer. I'm thinking that could have some consequences, son.
Well, I mean, that does bring new meaning to his title of St. Nick.
Indeed. Eddie Roll, hello. Anybody else? Nope. Pretty much nobody else. Same old folks. Listen, I am so grateful you guys showed up. You know, over Friday they had the Dodgers had the. Now you remember my big soliloquy I gave you guys about being a Dodger fan my whole life, my entire life since I was 3, listening with my father who passed away. So I didn't get to celebrate Father's Day with him, and so sad. So the Dodgers was this sort of link that gave us something that he gave me. He was a big fan. He gave them to me, and I watched him, and we went to many games together, and we watched things happen together, and it was wonderful. And they decided to bring in the blasphemous, crude, incredibly insulting Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, gay men who dress up and mock Catholics. I'm not even Catholic, but I don't like it. So it was bad enough that they invited him, but then they gave them some honorary citizen. I mean, it was so basically just absurd and so deeply offensive towards the majority of humans who are God-fearers that I took off my shirt and said, I'll never be a Dodger fan again. I'm done. I told you guys risk and commitment and sacrifice is the only shot America will have if we're going to continue to be free. And of course we're not. We're not free, White. You know that. We now know that there's lots of control over the systems in America as to who will be indicted, who will not, who will get away with murder, literally, who's going to do the bad, who's going to do the good. Whoever runs the show has all the power, and they get that power by telling everybody who doesn't have the power that really you're the power-hungry ones. We got to keep you at bay. So here we sit. But the Dodgers lost horribly to the Giants, which is their greatest rival, and some people thought it was divine intervention. Why do you think God gives a crap about baseball?
No, not really.
Then why'd you bring it up?
You brought it up.
Okay, if you're going to start just switching it around and...
Switching it... What do I
turning.
look like? Our camera system?
I don't know. I just wondered if you felt like. I mean, do you think that maybe God toys with us a little bit at times? Like, you think he just sort of lets things play out? And of course, he controls everything, and we don't know how it works. We don't know how God intervenes, when he does, when he doesn't. Obviously, there's times he doesn't. We wish he did. There's times when maybe he did and we never knew it, so we didn't give him any credit. But do you think that God almost, that there is a sense of him sort of orchestrating, and that there is a cost for planting evil seeds, that there is a crop that comes back? And of course, I think it's not really that big of an outcome. They lost a baseball game badly. Who cares? They mocked and ridiculed millions and millions and millions of people worldwide with these lunatics that they brought on and honored. So I don't know. I don't think it was a fair exchange, Wyatt, and I blame you.
I mean, I guess. Honestly, now that I think about it, I remember seeing a movie like a decade and a half ago.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this was like some seedless movie or if it's something I'm making up on the spot out of pure just boredom.
Yeah.
It was this movie called like Angels in the Outfield about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know that movie?
Yeah.
That's the only sense of divine intervention I've ever seen in a baseball game.
Okay.
So, no, I do not think the Dodgers versus Giants thing was divine intervention. I think they just really were that bad.
They were just bad that day.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? But don't you think the fact that it happened to be the day that they did this thing, that there was very few people even showed up to celebrate. It was an hour before the game, and it was empty basically. It was very hardly anybody there. But there were thousands protesting out in front, Catholics protesting this incredible mockery and evil that the Dodgers did. So I don't know. I mean, don't you want there to be justice? Don't you want there to be divine intervention? Don't you want the evil to get their comeuppance? I mean, don't we sometimes just wish we controlled that? And if we did,
absolutely. That is, like, I'd say one of the most common power fantasies is getting able to decide who gets punished and when.
And if you had that power, Wyatt, who would you punish?
That is a good question. Do I go with the serious answer or the hilarious one? That'd be good for a chuckle or two.
I'd say go for the hilarious one, because once you've set it up as hilarious...
The Amish. I don't know why.
The Amish.
I mean, think about it. What are they going to do? Complain online?
Oh, you know what you could do? For Christmas one year, buy every one of them extension cords.
Give them all Amazon accounts.
Yeah. I like extension cords because, of course, they'd have nowhere to plug them in. Wyatt, who else did show up lately? Anybody? Nicholas Blake. We had sandwiches for dinner. What did you have, Brad and Wyatt? I'm not really at liberty to give you that kind of information. You know, what is it about him always wanting to know what I'm eating? Why? Don't you think that's creepy? What if I had tater tots? I wouldn't want to bring that up, A, because they're not healthy, and B, it's an embarrassing word.
It really, like, just tater in and of itself, like, worst thing to call potato.
Yeah.
Tots? Tater tots? That somehow you've managed to make it sound worse.
I know.
It's like...
Is there tots used anywhere else other than toddlers, and that's babies?
Yeah.
So it's like a baby, but tots. Tater is kind of a... like he's some kind of southerner.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess we're going to have to get back down to North Florida and get our taters out. Now, they didn't come in big this way. Today, they didn't come in so big. We had a drought, as you know, and then the weasels got in, started munching around there, and we ended up with some tots, what we like to call tater tots. And they didn't grow up big. They didn't have any fertilizer. They just stayed nice and small and dwarfish. And I wouldn't say dwarf because that's going to offend somebody. But they're tot-like, and so I'm going to call them tater tots. That's what it sounds like to me, Wyatt.
Yeah, honestly, that's exactly what happened in my mind's ear when I thought of tater tots. Yep, exactly that.
You know what Marshall Pointer Reader said? Didn't someone make a claim that not even God could sink the Titanic?
Well,
if that's your marketing ploy, hey, come on to the Titanic. It can't sink. God can't even do that.
I'm just going to say, whoever did that marketing ploy probably doesn't do marketing anymore.
No, they're no longer with us.
Either that or they they jumped ship literally and decided to write stuff for the Hindenburg. Hey,
Right,
look at
what
this
would
new
be
fireproof
worse?
ship.
What would be worse? Drowning in 40-degree weather in the middle of the Atlantic knowing you're dead, or burning alive?
I've heard burning alive is like one of the worst ways to go,
Okay.
but they both suck.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to flip a coin for this one.
Okay.
Do you have a coin I can flip?
I don't. I don't
Okay,
have a coin.
our audience, pick a number between 1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Yeah, come on. Really randomize this for me, guys. Come on.
Well, I don't think they're going to jump in. We're
All
so
right,
far
fine,
behind.
fine. I'll pick one then. 2. Drowning in
Drowning.
water. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Come on, audience. That was your opportunity to interact with us.
Is that right?
That's why we do this live, so we can talk to you people.
You know Ashley Hawes, right?
Yes.
Guess
I
what she
think.
said?
Who?
Unless it's a boy. Is it a boy, Ashley? Could be.
I don't know.
I don't either. He said 3. She said 3. Tater tots are good, especially with ketchup. Listen, Ashley, are you a boy or a girl? I can't see from the picture. Why? Because let me tell you something. When you show me it on here, the picture is literally that big. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I have. It's like 3 pixels. I can't tell. Also, 3. Ha ha.
I know.
Nick. Okay. Why does everyone have the same idea of 1.5?
Yeah.
Would that be the equivalent of it like landing on its side?
Maybe, but you know what
What-
Rima Rosenbaum says?
What?
God allows bad things to happen so his children can step up and do the right thing. The way we handle bad things in life shows where our faith in Christ is. It's easy to follow bad things in life. The real challenge is doing good in Christ during the bad times. Now, that's a wonderful insight. It's wisdom, but it takes away from the fun of joking about tots, Titanic disaster. And by the way, statute of limitations probably is long past on that. If you want to make fun of those folks, they're long gone. If they're believing Jesus, they're in heaven. They probably don't care that they died because they're better off, wouldn't you think? How come, Wyatt? Because are you a Christian, son?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you die, you expect to go to heaven?
Yeah.
Okay. So why are you afraid to die? Wouldn't heaven be better than here?
I think it ties into that primal like fear of the unknown. Like we always hear what's gonna happen, even though nobody truly knows what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you stop and think about it, we could all be wrong. No, which isn't a bad thing. But
Wrong
we-
in what way?
Like, you know the song "I Can Only Imagine."
Yeah.
That's the entire point. Nobody really knows what it's gonna be like.
That's right.
And even though it's all good, that unknowingness is just, there's something about it, you know?
Do you think it's good, the unknowingness? Almost
Yeah,
makes it
well-
more mysterious and more, or is it in some ways make it more,
It's,
in some odd way, there's an anxiety to it?
well, yeah, it's anxiety because that's it. That's eternity at that point. So,
Yeah,
like-
yeah, right. There's no way back.
Yeah, exactly.
Why, you know who wrote I Can Only Imagine?
Yeah, well, I don't know the name, but I know we had him on.
Yeah, his name is Bart Millard.
Buminard, yep, I knew that man. Yep. knew him.
Or as he likes to mispronounce his last name, Millard. That's what he called him. Hey, it's Bart Millard. And it's like, dude, if you don't even know how to pronounce your own name, no wonder your song...
This is sort of like Neil Peart calling himself Peart. Like,
Yeah.
okay, pal, we got your name. We can take it from here.
Does he say Peart?
Yeah. He according to him, it was Peart is how you pronounce his name.
Okay. Whatever happened to Neil?
He died.
What did he die of?
Cancer,
What kind?
brain.
Oh, that's what my dad died of. Do you know my dad died of brain cancer? He was your grandfather. You met him a couple times, but you were so little you don't remember him, do you?
I vaguely remember a person-sized human that I met a few times.
Okay.
That's about it, though.
A person-sized
Yes,
human.
Yes, I know what I said.
Well, it's better than a tot-sized human.
Fair enough.
You know, I got to tell you something. I was looking through the internet the other day. Is that what you call it, son? Is that what you newfangled kids call the newfangled social media, the internet?
Yeah, it's been called that since it was invented, and it will probably be called that after the heat death of the universe.
Ha. Well, here's what I was thinking. I came across a, I don't know what you call it, a meme, I guess, but it was a list about woke.
Yeah. I think we call that in the terms a list.
A list. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's a
it was a
list.
list about, and what it said was, it's like how to have a woke mind. Do you have it pulled up there, White? Because this is what we were going to play last week, and then you screwed up.
Yeah, I got it up.
What's it called?
It is 10 symptoms of the woke mind.
10 symptoms of the woke mind. Now, it sounds interesting, and you think it's going to be sort of a funny sort of dig at wokies, and there's nothing funny about wokies because it's Marxism and it's communism light until it becomes complete control. So it's not funny. I mock it out of disdain for it, but come to find out, they were mocking those who aren't wokies, and they tried to sort of put out this idea of what they felt was what makes them so special, and how woke is really this beautiful, virtuous religious experience, which is, of course, what it is. It's their religion. So I wanted to just sort of talk to you guys just quickly before we get to our guest. And we got a great guest tonight. It's a warrior pastor. Remember, we had a warrior pastor series. Well, this Saturday night, I'm going to be at God Speak Church in Thousand Oaks, California, at Rob McCoy's church. Now, I'm going to be there Saturday night at their service. Then I'm going to be there Sunday. They have 3 services. So if you happen to be in California, the question is, what is wrong with you and how quickly can you flee? But if you're still there and you are in the northern LA County area, Thousand Oaks, come on down. This is a man who stood fast against the Californians who wanted to shut down his church, and he said, nope, not doing that. This is California, folks. This is a place that just voted that if you have a child that's 7, comes home and it's a boy and says, I'm a girl, and you don't treat them as a girl, the state can now come in and take your child from you. That's California. But somebody's got to fight these demons. Somebody's got to fight these lunatics. Somebody's going to fight these absolute buffoons. Somebody's got to fight. And Rob McCoy's a great fighter. He also was here just a couple weeks ago with Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. He's part of the division of the religious division, the church division for them. So we're going to talk about that. I'm going to be there this weekend, though, so if you're in that area, come on out, say hi, shake my hand. Very few people ever come to see me from the podcast. Karen Boyd's come a couple times. Benjamin Gregory's come a couple times. Nick Kress has come once. And there might be a couple other folks that have come that I'm not thinking of right now. Can you think of somebody I'm not thinking of, Wyatt?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, thanks for
trying.
names,
you know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for not even participating
I'm
at all.
trying to participate, but I have a memory capacity of 10 to 12 names total.
Can't you buy that in some aisle in Lowe's memory capacity?
I do 35, but we're sold out currently.
Well, listen. Here's what I wanted to tell you about. I wanted to talk about it because I'm going to show it to you guys because I think I did this once before with that old poster that's been out, love is love. What else does it say? In this house, love is love, and there no human is illegal. It's just this platitudes nonsense that I tore apart. Do you remember that? Or do you just remember that scene, that sign up, right? That placard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to take a crack at woke. Now let me ask you this. Why can you put this side by side, or do we have to just sort of throw it in the whole screen?
We're just going to throw it in the whole screen because, unfortunately, VMix is deciding to be difficult.
Okay.
Again.
Yeah, well, listen. Hey, Nicholas Blake just showed up. He said, my wife Tanya says, hello, everyone. All right. He's always speaking for Tanya. You'd think she would bring it up herself now and again. So here's what we were going to say. So I wanted to show you guys this idea that, if you have a belief system, and whatever it is, if you're a Christ follower, then you are beholden to know what you believe and how to defend it. As a matter of fact, it says, you study to show yourself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So God himself is saying, if you aren't figuring out what God is meaning, if you're not figuring out what is true, if you're not figuring out how to discern from that which is evil and that which is right and that which is light and that which is dark. You're supposed to be ashamed of yourself. So there's something at stake. And so I want to train you guys, to encourage you, to inspire you, to think about these things that you see. Don't just quickly respond out of emotion, which is what basically they want you to do. They're goading you, they're poking on you, so they can get some crazy emotion. So if they mock you, ridicule you, say, oh, what kind of a Christian are you? That you would get so angry after you Christians aren't allowed to be poked and prodded and burned alive and thrown off the deck of the Titanic, and yet still behave with complete and utter calmness and kindness and gratitude, and yet you speak of this God of yours, and yet I've noticed you consistently act as though he's not real. Or you are just a hypocrite, blah, 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 blah. Right, Wyatt? Well, anyways.
Didn't even give me a chance to respond to that. We just immediately went back.
I know.
Okay, I get it. You don't want me anymore. Just lead your stinking symptoms of the woke mind.
So here's what we're going to do. So I want to get you guys used to, remember, the militia of the mind, which is the group that is forming of American citizens who want to be part of the mighty 10,000, the first 10,000 people to decide to jump in and give $3 a month. Then we will be able to try to build a coalition of people that in certain guests, certain people behind that little $3 a month paywall, so that you will have access to them. You'll be able to educate yourself. You'll be able to have access to materials. We're going to have meetings. I've already told you about this. We're going to have interviews and things like that. And that's what I want to do. And in order to do it well, I want to train you. I want you to become warriors. I want you to be out in the battlefields of your area that you're responsible for, being able to discern these things. So I'm just going to off the cuff, didn't take time, didn't write it down, but let's look about this and let's learn how to analyze and how to be logical and how to be reasonable and how to take apart presuppositions and falsehoods. So White, if you could throw it on you got it next to me.
I don't know how this happened, but just roll with it.
Shh. Don't say anything. Just leave it there. Just because you're going to jinx it, because somehow you did it right. So here it is, 10 symptoms of the woke mind. Now, keep in mind that these are people who are trying to act as though, yes, I know, we're woke, and we're fragile, and we're snowflakes, and blah, blah, blah. But here's what it really means. And then, of course, they're going to try to pat themselves on the back as though they have some deep virtue here that we should all ascribe to. So let's see what it means. Number one, you read books and don't burn them. Okay. First off, I've been alive quite a few years. I've been a conservative, I guess, my whole life, even before I knew that was a term. Been a Christian my whole life. Been a patriot, been an American, lover of the nation, appreciator of the nation. I've never burned a book that I know of on purpose in my life. I might have accidentally put a book somewhere and got burned. I don't know. But the idea of burning book is implying something, because nothing could sound more Hitler-esque than book burning. So we're going to use that first. Hey, we read books. We don't burn them. Yeah, you do read books. It's true. You read Mein Kampf. You read books about CRT, critical race theory. You read books about Black Lives Matter and critical theory and queer theory, and all of these ideas are books that you read. You don't burn them, and they are absolute horrible books. They're lies. They're destructive. They are killing America. They are stealing freedom. They are wiping out our ability to be together and to disagree agreeably. You read books that are evil. So just because you read a book doesn't mean the book is a good book or worthy of being read. But just to let you know, when's the last book burning you've seen? I mean, who's doing that? See, we don't want to burn books. We want them to be available. That's what freedom is. What we don't want you to do is to get sexualized books for children. That makes you a pedophile, and that means you should go to prison for that. We don't want books that are using... Why is anything with sex at all taught in school? Ever. Just teach math. You can't get that down. Sex is easy. It's not complicated. Don't even need a roadmap. Don't need a book. If you're human, and you got genitals, you can have sex. Math's hard. Stick to that. 2, you embrace science. No, you don't. You don't embrace science. You worship it. It's your God. It's your prophets out there telling what is true. And you live by them. We embrace science. Which science? The science that said you got to be 6 feet apart during the corona COVID? Cult? How about the mask you wore that we now know throughout at least 40 different data points from around the world didn't work, and those who didn't do this crazy crap had more people alive? How about the vaccines that have now proven to be deleterious? I mean, they did. So you don't believe in the science. You believe in the politicized control that science is using to control you, your behavior, and what you're allowed to do or do not. So, yeah, you worship science, and it's killing us, and you're the fool. Because science is no longer trustworthy. 3, you're willing to change your mind when new information becomes available. Seriously? Seriously? No, you're not. You're not willing to change your mind. You still think, as we just mentioned, that everything you did was right. The only thing I've ever heard people maybe wonder about is maybe we shouldn't have been mean to people. Now that we see that, I guess it was okay you didn't take the vaccine. But you don't change your mind because you are fully committed to leftist Marxist ideology, which means whatever we hate deserves it because we have all the truth. We have all complete and utter access to truth. We're the virtuous ones. We're the good ones. Punch a Nazi. That's their big thing. Hey, it's a Nazi. They deserve to be punched. No, you've decided they're a Nazi. You don't have proof of that. It's your systemic narcissism that gives you the right to punch people that are smarter than you and for sure more noble than you'll ever be. You understand that most issues are not black and white. Could there be a more ironic statement for a leftist than that, who sees nothing but black people and white people? Nothing else do you see. Everything is race only. Everything is white fragility, your whiteness. Black lives matter. Black must be celebrated. You're absurd. When I say systemic narcissism, I'm not kidding. These people live in lies and literally can look at facts, staring them in the face, and say things like, we don't think everything's black and white. And it's like you guys couldn't be more completely committed to that premise. Oh, my Lord, Wyatt. You believe in true equality for all people. What does that even mean, true equality? What does it mean, true equality? Does it mean that everybody's going to get exactly the same thing? You believe in that? Then you're an idiot, because that's never happened in human history, and that never will. Why? Because there's some stupid people out there that are never going to get anything, because they're stupid. And there's some really good people that are going to get some good things because they're good and hardworking. And there's some people that are going to work hard and not get as much as the guy over here who didn't work as that. And some guy's going to accidentally hit the lottery and they don't deserve it. This is the truth of life. Even Jesus, who's smarter than everybody out there watching, said, hey, the poor you're always going to have with you. You like to share. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't like to share anything. Matter of fact, if I was to wear cornrows, you'd say I was culturally appropriating somebody else's culture. What you call cultural appropriation, we used to call sharing. If I invented a television or a jet airplane or a rocket or a cell phone or a computer or a television or a microphone or a guitar, I shared it with whoever wanted it and could do something great with it. That was sharing. You guys don't share anything. You don't share anything. As a matter of fact, those of us who want to have access to Facebook and Twitter and everything else that you do, and you don't have to agree with this, but we just want you to share what is available to everybody. We'll pay our way just like you're paying your way. No. You cancel us. You don't share anything. You're a liar. You're self-deluded. You're the worst of us. You embrace cooperation. No, you don't. You do not. You embrace conformity. You embrace bow the knee to Baal. You embrace you can't disagree with me. You embrace you must think like us. You embrace you must conform. You embrace I want others to rule over us, but you must get in line. You do not. You don't. You do not embrace cooperation. You respect others' rights. No, you don't. You don't. Jordan Peterson did an interview with Robert Kennedy Jr. about vaccines. YouTube just took it off the air. Robert Kennedy is a presidential candidate. Jordan Peterson is quite an intellectual, quite an incredibly influential guy right now in the last few years. They took it off the air. Why? Because they don't like to share. They don't like to cooperate unless you do exactly what we demand. This is why these people are so delusional and why they're so broken and why you cannot speak to them, folks. Why you can't help them, why you can't walk them through anything. They actually believe this crap. They think this is who they are. They can't see their own cancer. You believe culture and the arts have value. Well, obviously the culture has value because if we didn't have a culture, we wouldn't be here. And the arts have value because the arts consist of lots of things. Painting, sculptures, music, plays, acting. Heck, athletics could be an art form. Something wonderful that the human body can do. So who came up with the idea that a conservative doesn't like the arts? It doesn't. I don't see where you're correlating that. This presupposition, this sort of undergirding that there's something nefarious that we don't like about the arts and culture. Where is that? Show me where that's happening. I do know this, though. You don't like conservatives come into a college, you kick them right off. So there is no sort of appreciation of that culture's difference of opinion. You don't appreciate it. You're closed-minded bigots. And lastly, you care for the planet in all of its life. No, you don't. You worship the planet. And not all of its life. Conservatives' lives you don't care about. Christians' lives you don't care about. Do you know Christians are the #1 persecuted religious group on earth and have been for the last, 5 or 6 years? You care for us? No. You think that we deserve to be put into prison because we have particular moral beliefs that we read from a Bible. We didn't write the Bible, by the way. Just to let you know, we didn't write it. We're just reading it saying, okay, this is what God says we're trying to do. We pass it on. That's what good people do. That's what a neighbor would do. Pass it on. Hey, there's some stuff you need to know. I don't want you to get in trouble. Don't want your life to go misery path. So here's what God says. Well, I don't believe in it. Okay, well, you don't have to. I have to tell you. But you don't have to believe in it. You don't have to live it yourself. But I wanted to love you enough to give you this information so you had a chance to right the ship. So no, nowhere do you appreciate people again unless they're like you. And your worship of the planet, your absolute disdain for human flourishing over a planet, over a slug, over a cricket that's going to be displaced so people aren't going to have a place to live. You're the people that believe that fossil fuels, which are the greatest boon to human history, for cheap economic fuel, that especially the poorest of the poor don't have to now burn cow dung to feed themselves, or wood, much more worse of a polluter. And these people that never had opportunities to have machinery that could pump water for them and things that they could never have done and died early, suddenly can have gas and they can do things. And you want it gone because the planet's going to disappear. You're killing people. You don't care, though. You'll never see them. You'll fly over them in your jet that's polluting the crap out of things, but it's okay if you pollute. It's okay if you pollute, because you're the ones that are going to go land at the let's not pollute session and tell all the rest of us how we have to live, because you're the billionaires and you have all the money and you have all the power and you have all the control. So, yeah, we're going to have to eliminate some of you. And I notice, billionaires, the one thing you all have in common: you never volunteer to be eliminated. This whole woke thing, you can take it off where. It's evil. And it's delusion. And it's a religion. And it's killing Americans. It's killing the world. And soon, if it doesn't stop, we will not even be a free nation, let alone a free earth. Militia of the Mind. Soon, and very soon, we're going to be launching it. I think it's going to be the beginning of probably next week, where I really want to start the process of getting us going. We have had some folks who have already signed up. More will. I just haven't done a big campaign because I still had to work out the website. We're still trying to get all the pieces put together. As you guys know, you were here from the beginning. I'm not a tech guy, so little by little, step by baby step, we're trying to build this thing up so it could be something that you can count on. That you have a community, you have people that will with you and will fight with you and will love you and will talk to you, and that we can come together and we can have marching orders and ways up for the militia of the mind to go into our little communities and fight back against school boards that are trying to bring pedophilia to our children. We're going to be able to fight back against people who are not allowing us to have cars like we've always had, and free enterprise. And you're going to be able to fight back in those who are trying to steal private property, which must go for them to control the world. And they're trying to take private property. This is the end of free speech and liberty in America, if we can't even own property. So this is what the Militia of the Mind is, and it's going to be a group of folks that, and they'll constantly grow, I hope, who want to help us and inspire us. And we'll just be us, just a bunch of us, as long as I can be on this air, talking, praying, believing, fighting, and hanging on. And, you know, nothing gives us more ample inspiration than to see people do it in real time. You know, it's easy to read about the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and say, go get them. But when you're the one that's in the middle of it and it's your turn to have a bullet go flying by, suddenly you find out what you're made of, or not. So you're in war. Now, you don't have to fight. You don't have to shoot back. You don't have to get on your Kevlar vest. You don't have to put on your, bunker. You don't have to get your AR. You can just sit around and just think it's somehow going to fix itself. Course correct. But it's not, because we're being invaded by communists. This is what's happening. It's couched in a brand new flavor called critical race or critical theory, being embraced in ESG and DEI. It's a whole new means of using the capitalist elements to build billions of dollars so that those oligarchs and technocrats can then control the rest of us, take everything we have and keep there. This is maybe the greatest evil force that's ever assembled in human history, because they literally can stop your bank account, stop your ability to have fuel, stop your ability to eat by controlling the food. This is where we're at, folks. It's as real as it gets. So you don't have to fight. And as you lay dying, and as your wives are being raped and your daughters are being carted off, hey, you did it. Your fault. You are the coward. You deserve it. If you don't fight, you deserve everything that comes to you. So get in the game. Fight. Join the Militia of the Mind. Tell your friends. I need every one of you guys to say, this is what we're doing. It's just the Peasants' Revolt, Militia of the Mind, the Mighty 10,000. Let's see if we can get 10,000 people. That will allow us to do lots more than what we're doing today. And we'll be doing the podcast more often. It won't be just being once a week, because there's so much more information we want to get out there. So tell your friends, hey, it's $3 a month. So it's $36 you paid for a whole year, and now we're little by little, step by step building an army. And of course, we want it to be 100,000. We want it to be 1 million, 10 million, 100 million. Who knows? I don't know if any of this will do any good. But I'm going to die trying. But I can't do it by myself. I need you help. And I need people like Rob McCoy. This is a man who stood up against the tyrants in California, and I think he got up to $850,000 in fines by LA County. He said, I'm not paying. And he didn't. And he won. As so many Christians have won when they had the balls to stand up and act like men and fight. Fight based on the laws of the land given to them. The Constitution, the First Amendment, these are all given to us by this land. You have an access and a logical right to utilize these principles to defend yourself. And if you don't, you're just a coward or you're a fool. And if you want to be a fool, I can't stop you. But you're taking us all down with you. I need you guys to remember what it meant to be an American. We have to really do something. Not just talk about it. Not just wring our hands. Draw a line in the sand and say, you will push me no more. I want you to meet Rob McCoy. He's with Godspeak Church, Thousand Oaks, California. He's an amazing guy, and he's going to inspire you. He's one of us, and he's fighting in the evil land of California, and it has gone off the rails. I just saw a councilman when he saw that vote that came to say we're going to take your kids if you do not tell your 6-year-old that you're a boy when she's actually a girl, and they will strip them from parents. That a councilman said, I've been telling you guys fight, fight, fight. Now I'm saying no, flee. I'm leaving California and I'm moving to America. That's what a city councilman said in California. That's how bad that crap hole's become. Everything the left touches dies because they're cancer. They have the cancerous Midas touch. You have to be the greatest buffoon in history to screw up California because the place was a gold mine, literally. So I want you guys to listen to this conversation with a warrior pastor to inspire you, to lift you up, but to show you what is at stake and what we can do, and that you can, in fact, overcome if you get 5 smooth stones and say, how dare you mock the living God. Battle's here. You don't have to shoot back. They're just going to shoot you in the head. So why don't you go down swinging? Please enjoy this conversation with the lead pastor of Godspeak Church, Thousand Oaks, California, Rob McCoy. So, this is God's Comic, Brad Stine, and of course, it's the special edition, Brad Stine Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. You know, when I started the podcast, I did not expect it to do what it's doing, but it seems to be filling a niche for a lot of warriors out there, Christians who believe that their faith should be practiced unapologetically and with courage and with testosterone. And if you're a woman, I would say lean towards estrogen, but either way, we'll use it. But we are unapologetic about what is true, because what good is any of this faith of ours if we don't live it as though we actually believe it's true and that it actually has ramifications on how the world works. This is a sadly neglected element of the Christian American church. But the good news is not every pastor subscribes to that perspective. And I am happy and fortunate and grateful to bring on this next pastor in the Warrior Pastor series of men that I know personally or was told fought courageously during the cult of Corona, but also continue to and have continued to fight courageously as pastors for their community that they're responsible for when it comes to the truth of God's word and how to affect and implement into our culture the Judeo-Christian ethic that created the West as we know it. It's under attack. It's being destroyed. They might win at least this battle. They will not win the war. God wins every time. But Doesn't mean we might have to face some repercussions, but I do know this. I'm going down like a man, and that means with all my guns blazing. But which guns are appropriate? Which guns are Jesus guns? Can you even say guns and Jesus together? That's part of what we'll be talking about, because I am privileged to be bringing on a pastor. I don't even know how many years he's been a pastor, but he's a pastor of a very well-respected denominational group known as Calvary Chapel, who I'm very familiar with. I used to attend years ago Chuck Smith's Calvary Chapel, and have been in numerous ones over the years, Mike McIntosh and folks like that. So love what they're doing, love what they stand for. And this particular one is God Speak Calvary Chapel. And here's the big kicker: in Thousand Oaks, California. What kind of a man has the audacity to speak God's truth in California? What this particular one does. He's a man of God, and he's a brother in Christ. Please welcome to Warrior Pastor Series, Pastor Rob McCoy. My brother!
How's it going, Brad? Good to hear your voice and see your face.
Well, ditto. I'm glad I have a face, and I'm glad I have a voice to be heard. Clearly, that is for those who have any inkling of what my particular career has been. I don't know if there's anything more important to me than free speech, and I don't mean that simply as an American sort of bullet point, but I believe that free speech, like all the rights that we have, are God-breathed, that they have a deeper significance, and the ability for us to be truth tellers, and I believe Christians are about the last truth tellers on earth, is part of God's ordination. He expects us to speak truth at all times, irrespective of what it costs us. And by the way, if you're speaking the truth, it'll cost you something. So tell me, if we can, let's just jump right in, my brother, because I don't want to stereotype California. I lived there 30 years. It is, pound for pound, the best state in the country by what it offers people in its geography, and its options, and its beauty, and its weather, and its all the different, from mountains to oceans to redwoods to wine country to San Diego to, I mean, it's got it all. There's nothing like California, and it has completely derailed, which is not unusual if we haven't noticed. Been a lot of derailments happening over the U.S. So I want to talk to you first about that, because it's easy to mock and ridicule and make a punchline out of California, as I have done. But it almost comes bittersweet, because I'm sad. It's such a wonderful state. So talk to me about the State of the Union of California in Christianity as you see it.
Yeah. Well, I don't hold the same view that you have in regards to California. I'm still here. I was born here. My dad was born here. My grandfather was born here. And I'm assuming, and I know I'm right, that you're happy that the Congress has switched leadership from Democrat to Republican. And if you're happy about that, you can credit California and New York, because we overperformed in our state, and that's why we were able to turn the House. Other states that are red didn't perform, and it was California's remnant that worked hard. And we got Mike Garcia in the Congress in a purple district. It blue at worst, purple at best. So California has hope. We won a number of local ballot issues by participating in what's legal in California, ballot harvesting. Our church participated in that, and we were able to beat them at their own game, and so did Jack Hibbs. And we're watching a turn. And then in addition, the pastors who stood boldly in the face of tyranny were all from California for the most part. We were standing, and you talk about the Christian community here in California. It's kind of like Gideon's army. The ones, and this is probably an insult to the host of the show because you left, but hey, God loves the odds. He'll whittle us down until and then he gets the glory. California is a great place to launch a ministry, focus on the family, Campus Crusade for Christ, Calvary Chapel. Everybody starts here and then moves out of state because they don't participate in the ecclesia, the public square, and contending for the welfare of their neighbors. The church has given up politics because they say politics is dirty. And I always say, well, so's the church. That's no excuse for backing out of something that requires our effort. And they say, well, I'm tired of voting for the lesser of two evils. And I always say, unless Jesus is running for office, you're always voting for the lesser of two evils. Christians just keep making excuses. We have the worst voting bloc in America, 60 to 80 million self-professing evangelicals, of which only half are registered to vote. And of the half that are registered to vote, only half of those vote in a presidential election, a total of 12% in a non-presidential election. And we wonder why we're losing our Judeo-Christian heritage. Well, you got to stand and fight. The Apostle Paul says, having done everything, stand.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the last thing, Brad, he said in Galatians, stand fast therefore in the liberty for which Christ has set you free. He wrote that in prison. And liberty's doing what's right. Freedom is having choices, Thomas Jefferson said. So we may be imprisoned in California, but we're standing and we're doing what's right.
Well, and I think historically, if we look at anytime the church is persecuted or oppressed, it usually rises up. It becomes more powerful, more robust, maybe not necessarily having the numbers because they're being persecuted or they're being wiped out. But I mean, I look at China. I mean, this is maybe one of the most evil governments on earth. Again, when it comes to human rights, the Uyghur Muslims is basically imprisoned in a concentration camp, and I think they harvest organs. I mean, these people are absolute lunatics, of course, because it's based on the undergirding of atheism that gives them permission to do whatever they want, because atheism is evil and cruel, and especially when it sprouts in the form of Marxism and becomes a political, philosophical idea. But that is what it is. Nevertheless, there's a gigantic, amazing, robust Christian explosion in China, even in Iran, Iraq, any of these theocracies. And the only thing that I can imagine, other than God won't abandon anybody, he loves us all, but the fact is that when you become a Christian in a place where it actually costs you something, you're all in, because there was something at stake. I don't know that there has been anything at stake in America for, I don't even know how long, for Christians. We had the fortunate blessing, one of a kind, of a country that was kind of formed on the idea that if you believe that Jesus Christ is God, you can sign this Mayflower Compact, jump on board, let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
And that created the beginning and the launching of a country that nobody could perceive what it would become. But it's a double-edged sword. You're rich, and the rich have a hard time hanging on because they assume they're good, that they're noble, that they're virtuous. God must love me because look what he's given me. And next thing you know, you become sort of self-reliant and worshiping of yourself, and there's nothing left. Well, Christianity in the spiritual realm, same thing. If I have a persecution, but I don't care because that's part of the process of being a believer, how are you going to destroy those people? They're living this thing in real time. So do you see what was maybe caused some of this problem when you said we backed out of the political movements, we backed out of the cultural world and movies and places where we would have been of effect? Because why? Some form of legalism, some form of dogmatism that felt like somehow we're not supposed to suddenly renew the culture and regenerate the culture, which is kind of our calling. You know, what happened to Christian Americans where we lost our influence by not thinking we were supposed to influence?
So if I heard you correctly, the question is what happened to the church that resulted in the status that we're now facing? Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, I just made it convoluted and confusing because I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. So I just
I forgot that I'm a guest on your show because I was intrigued by everything you're sharing, and then all of a sudden I have to answer a question. So forgive me. A perfect example. You spoke highly of Calvary Chapel. And I'll give you a really good case study. Calvary Chapel started with Chuck Smith in California, Southern California, in 1968. He broke away from the Foursquare Church, and in 1968, Reagan was governor of California. It was a red state, and we had just completed the California Aqueduct, was a marvel in civil engineering that brought the water from the Sierras into the most fertile farmland in the country, actually probably around the world, the San Joaquin Valley, that produces more cotton than the entire southern states combined. And that's 1968, and Reagan's governor. We had the fourth largest GDP, gross domestic production, And it was the state of the future. Everyone wanted to come here. I was born here in '64. And here you have Chuck Smith in 1968, and he breaks away from the Foursquare Church because he and his wife Kay looked out at a sea of humanity that were washed up on the shores of California. And what had happened in '68 is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. Bobby Kennedy was shot in Los Angeles by Sirhan Sirhan. And we had the My Lai massacre, the Tet Offensive. The following year, we'd have the Kent State shooting. The nation was being torn apart. The warp and the woof of the fabric of our country was being ripped apart by socialism. And all of their heroes that had promised them hope and change were dead. And so these young people checked out of a church that was irrelevant and focusing solely on materialism. And they didn't find any power in the church, so they checked out and explored Eastern religions and experimental drug use. And of course, sin is pleasurable for a season, but the end therein is death. And they end up awash on the shores of California. And Chuck and Kay look out at the sea of burned out hippies and began an outreach to them with the simple idea of teaching the Bible verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book, and then bringing in syncopated rhythms with Lonnie Frisbee. There's a new movie out about Chuck's life. It's pretty fascinating. Kelsey Grammer was weeping on an interview because it touched him so deeply as he acted in it. And then I'd just say this, that Chuck deliberately stayed away from politics because all these kids have been burned out. And they're very evangelistic. So people say, oh, I don't do politics. I just preach the gospel. That's what we've been doing at Calvary Chapel for 54 years, 55 years. And we've been teaching verse by verse, chapter by chapter, book by book. And that simple model has experienced 10,000% growth. There's now 1,800 Calvary Chapels around the world. At one point, 4 of the 10 largest churches in America were Calvary Chapels. Harvest Crusades with Greg Laurie, Somebody Loves You Crusades with Raul Reese. South of Van Nuys to the Mexican border, there's more Calvary Chapels than there are Dunkin' Donuts. And the lion's share of those 1,800 churches are in California. So how is 55 years of preaching the gospel, 10,000% growth, and that's conversion growth, not transfer growth, how's that affected the state of California? Well, we no longer have the 4th largest GDP. We now have the 5th. We have the highest gas tax, sales tax, income tax, corporate tax. We lead the nation in debt. You combine the next 4 largest states' debt, doesn't equal the debt of California. We're the authors of no-fault divorce that Reagan signed in '69, became law in '70, and decimated marriage across the country. We're the authors of transgender bathroom bills and the most secular progressive sexual education curriculum ever concocted. It's so vile you can't read a page of it from your pulpit. And then here's the kicker, Brad. California, abortion was legal long before '73 in California, and it's estimated we've aborted more children in California than the current population of Canada. And we don't just abort them. We don't just rip their parts, rip them apart in their mother's womb and flush their parts in the sewer system of California. No, we harvest their organs on the downbeat of the heart before we do that. And I would just say to all the pastors out there who don't do politics, where's the power of that gospel? Look what it's done to the state and to our neighbors and to the least of these that have no voice. And that's the convicting nature, because Matthew 16:18, Jesus said, upon this rock, he's talking to Peter up at Caesarea Philippi, he says, upon this rock, I will build my, and everyone says church. That word's not in there. Jesus deliberately uses a secular term. He didn't say synagogue or temple. He said ecclesia or ecclesia. And Aristotle already defined that word hundreds of years earlier. It means public square or assembly or city hall. It's where in the city-state they gathered for the welfare of their community to decide the rules and the laws that they would live under. And people say, Pastor, you're participating in politics, and that is the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the leaven of Herod. And I go, no, it's not. The Pharisees were conservative. The Sadducees were liberal in their theology, and Herod was king. So you have the priest-king class in 6,000 years of recorded history. It's always been the case, but those two have worked together to suppress the individual. And when Jesus said, beware of the leaven of the Sadducees and the Pharisees and of Herod, what he was saying is, attempting to establish civil law apart from moral law is the leaven, because the moral law is the wise restraints that make men free. Galatians 3, the law is a school teacher, guardian to point us to Christ until faith comes. If you remove the moral law and try to establish civil law, then the civil law becomes a weapon to enslave you. And if you don't believe that, what just happened with this scamdemic? They weaponized the law, void it of moral law. The governor could sit shoulder to shoulder with all of the state officials, no mass at the French Laundry, where their hors d'oeuvres were more expensive than the welfare checks they were giving to all the people whose jobs they just destroyed. and they quarantined the abused with their abusers, and they shuttered children's schools, and they made the elderly die alone for a virus that has a 99.7% survival rate. Where was the church? They shuttered their doors and joined in the tyranny. And so, yeah, there's hope, but this is a refiner's fire, and the ones that are willing to stand now deserve the love and respect of all men and women, as Thomas Paine said in The American Crisis.
Well, you're starting to tick me off even more, because I get so angry at what happened, and it kind of started the Warrior Pastor series that is specific. I thought it was just another guests that I wanted to talk to, but I decided to give them their own segment that just sort of, I hope, inspires other pastors, because the truth is some guys, and a lot of them maybe are younger pastors who don't have a lot of experience, and this took everybody by surprise. It was really cold-cocked us as a nation, because we just never had experienced anything like that, and expected the government to run roughshod over our freedoms and our rights. But I got to tell you, buddy, the thing that broke my heart, and I've said this many times, wasn't that they stole our constitutional rights. It was that there were so many Americans willing to give them away and didn't care. To realize that you can't fight a fight when half of the nation doesn't give a crap about liberty. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them. You keep me safe. You keep me fed. You tell me how many masks to put on. You tell me how many boosters I need. What you tell me what to do to my children. I don't care, as long as we somehow stay safe. This myopic, cowardly, spineless way of seeing the world certainly is not what God had intended for us, and it's certainly not the way that any great nation like this could have been created. It was risk takers and those who believe there was a grander principle, that there are things in life more important than life. Easy to say, sounds like a bumper sticker, until it's true, until your life is at stake. And then you're like, am I really going to do this? Am I really going to risk this? Am I really going to rock the boat? Well, it seems like Christianity historically has been given this sort of very, very one-sided definition of what it means to be a Christian. That you're loving. And I always say, define your terms. Yeah, Christians are loving. God is love. What is love? Give me the full spectrum. Because if you mean love doesn't come with discipline, if you mean love doesn't come with punishment, if you believe love doesn't come with an expectation of virtue, if you believe love doesn't come with an expectation of you being committed to your lover and not betraying them, if you believe love means that you can't be held accountable, that's not love. That's license, and it's lust, and it's candy, and it has no substance. And the act of expecting a disciplined people, which all the founders said was necessary for this nation to survive. You're going to have to be religious people, because you're a republic, you're the government. You're going to have to be a virtuous people of your own, have your own compass, and maintain true north, because we're not going to let the government mandate it onto you as to what you are allowed to think and believe. And that's what the First Amendment's all about. But it does lead us into territory that obviously you're an expert on. So grateful, by the way, brother, for people like you, brother, Christian pastors like yourself, who've studied and clearly have a real grasp of the cultural milieu, because used to be that we counted on the pastors to give us a lay of the land, and that's not true anymore. And so to be aware of the cultural elements and how they pertain to not just us being Christians, like it's about a self-preservation, but about saying you need to understand what's really happening, because you need to fight against lies, because the enemy is here and you need to beat him. You need to get some rocks in a sling and start attacking those who would disgrace your God. And here we sit. So tell me, as a pastor who's responsible for all these folks who are listening to you and getting their marching orders from you. I know you get it from God. I'm not saying you're but you are their leader. How do we move forward in involving ourselves culturally, politically like this as Christians, and not be sort of what they now use as Christian nationalism, a sort of a malicious a moniker to try to hamstring us from being able to have some influence and be able to fight back. So where do you think it can get dangerous and out of balance? And where is it essential that Christians stand up as the warriors that God would call them to be?
Good question. First of all, I want to comment that you've heard the term unconditional love. There's no such thing. Love comes with conditions.
Yeah.
For us to be loved by God, Christ died on the cross. That sin had to be paid for. So that love that God extends came at a great price, and there is a condition to it. And this understanding of how to shepherd God's people in a time of persecution and trial. The first thing I always remember is it was Winston Churchill who said, "The man was cursed to have been born in uninteresting times." And that's just not true for us. Jeremiah says, "Before you were born, I knew you. You were fearfully and wonderfully made, knitted together in your mother's womb. I have ordained you to be a prophet to the nations." He didn't see a lot of converts. He was the weeping prophet. But in the same regard, in those trials and those difficult times in life, he would go back to that ordination from the womb. And I would say to everyone who is struggling being alive in this season where we're watching the World Economic Forum and we're seeing, nationalized ID cards and reminiscent of 1939 Germany, I would say the difference between then and now is there is a remnant willing to stand in America. And victory is not determined by the outcome, but by the obedience. I don't count my life dear to myself. When I was getting ready to be arrested and we violated the restraining order at the church to remain open, I said goodbye to Michelle. I kissed her, went to church expecting to be arrested that day. She did too. She expected me to be arrested. But we had already counted the cost. So there was nothing they could take from us that we didn't already surrender, because liberty was so precious to us that at that point it didn't matter. So the fear went away. They had no power over us. We were willing to lose everything for the sake of that. And so were everyone else. And it resonated. Brad, we have baptized twice as many people in 18 months as the attendance of the church was 18 months ago. And these are folks that have never darkened the doors of a church. One man in particular, an atheist who owns a gun store in town, showed up the day that we were violating the restraining order, and the press descended on us. He held up a sign and said it took this, and he had an expletive, 4 letters. It said it took this to get this atheist to church. And he has been a strong supporter of God Speak. And we've watched people whose businesses we supported come to Christ. And I would just say and have people remember that people aren't the enemy, they're the opportunity. And the Holy Spirit, as we're watching this awakening and this maybe revival in Asbury, Kentucky and Lee University, and we were just in Brownsville, Florida, where something's happening. We're watching Gen Z start to awaken, and they're crying out for God, and God's visiting. He's doing a work. Now, however we want to judge that, and history will ultimately decide, but this I do know, the Holy Spirit is the most misunderstood person of the Godhead. Yet we know that his title is, he is the Spirit of Truth. And if people want to see an awakening, it's going to boil down to this. They have to love truth so much that they're no longer afraid of the consequences of standing for the truth. That's true love. Speaking the truth in love, that is the idea. In 1930s in Germany, and then going into World War II, where almost 60 million people would be just annihilated because of this Nazi regime, 6.5 million Jews burned, incinerated, gassed. It wasn't Hitler and all of his victims. It was Hitler and a complacent, compliant nation of people that were so afraid of the consequences of telling the truth that they lied to each other, they lied to themselves, they lied to their family, they lied to their boss, they lied to their employees, they lied to their neighbor, they lied to their enemies. And the entire nation was embroiled in one big fat lie that brought destruction and decimation across the land. And here we are today. And I'm watching, there's enough folks, and it just, you only need 1 in 9. 1 in 9 Americans fought in the Revolutionary War. You need a small percentage, 3% actually, just to stand up and say this far and no further.
Yes.
And we're watching that.
Yes.
We're watching that in real time. And This is the last part. And I say this to all the folks out there. Pastors are peace loving, but they think that peace is the absence of conflict. It's not. It's the presence of Christ in the midst of the conflict. He didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. We're contending for ideologies. Now, people are the opportunity, but their ideologies are the enemy. We have to contend for truth. And if you want to have the power of the Holy Spirit come upon you, in the Greek, it's a preposition of P, upon you, overflowing, where you have this dunamos power. You want that? And I'm not talking swinging from the chandelier, charismatic, whatever it is. I'm just telling you, if we got a supernatural task ahead of us, we're going to need some supernatural power. And here's how it works. And I asked this question in an audience of people when I was asked, will there be an awakening? And I said, it depends. And I looked out at the audience. I said, you all won't like the answer to my question. And I asked this across the country as I speak to audiences. And I said, tonight, I'm not asking you to raise your hand. I just want you to answer the question in the silence of your own heart. How many of you out there took the shot because you believed in its efficacy? And how many of you took the shot because you were afraid to lose your job, or you couldn't see your grandkids, or you were afraid of something? Because the fear of man is a snare. You were lying. And you're here to tell me you love the God of truth and you're willing to stand for truth no matter what it costs, and you want an outpouring of God upon your life? Ask the Lord for his power to stand for his truth, because he is truth. He's the embodiment of truth. So you could hear a pin drop. They wanted the emotion, they wanted the music, they wanted to feel, but the rubber meeting the road, where our faith is related into action, where we stand, having done all, stand. You're immovable. That's what I see happening.
Well, see, like I said, you got to understand something, that pastors are so necessary.
Amen.
Right now, they're so important. I was called to be a prophet.
They're the beacons of liberty, Brad.
Yes. Well, you've mentioned the Revolutionary War. They literally were the most feared regiment.
Yeah.
of the British was a black robe.
Peter John Muhlenberg.
Yes.
And his brother Frederick was the first Speaker of the House.
Yes, but these were pastors who integrated clearly their spiritual dimension of what was true about God and the world and how he revealed it to us, and how it applied to the day-to-day of life that these people were encountering, and where what they should be able to stand for. So, but when I hear you speak of the things that you said, especially holding churchgoers to account for what they say they believe, but yet how they behave, because the Bible is pretty specific. The older I get, brother, the more I realize that God judges the heart, and he's a God of grace and mercy. Thank you, because I need it desperately. But I feel like we have really underperformed as American Christians in not expecting anything from believers. You got saved, show up, get your coffee, do your sermon, sing your song, you're in the club. And I just see a God who's constantly saying, what did you do with what I gave you? I gave you 5 talents. What did you do? I got you 5 more. Oh, good. I gave you only 3. Didn't complain about not having 5. Didn't say it was unjust or wasn't fair or wasn't equitable. I only get 3. Okay, what'd you do with them? Got you 3 more. Good for you. What about you? Only got 1. Okay, don't complain. I gave you 1. What'd you do? I buried it. Oh, well, you're wicked. Oh, no. You're not supposed to be wicked. You're supposed to pet me and tell me how sad my life is and how unfair it was.
Give you a participation trophy.
You give me participation. I wasn't privileged. I only have 1. Can you do me a favor and take from the 10 and give me some more? Because he's rich, so he should be punished. And God's economy was, no, you're wicked. I'm taking your 1. You're pathetic. Go off to be tortured. I'm giving this to the guy that made the most, because I can trust him the most, because he was profitable with what he was entrusted with.
Yeah.
Well, we're entrusted with the truth, and this is what I've seen. People would ask me, who knows? This was Corona was a weird thing, because we'd never experienced something quite of that epic proportion before. It was not a typical basic fight that was easy to understand. There's the British, there's the the Patriots. I understand. That's a German and that's an American. Oh, I understand. That's the Yankee. That's the rebel. Okay, I understand. But this was kind of like we're all kind of stuck under the same umbrella of this virus. We all want to take care of each other, but we don't really know how to do that the best. And so you could be shamed, you could be ridiculed, you could lose your job, you could lose everything. And I said to people, I don't know. There are some things that are in the Bible, in the Christian faith, that are immutable. They can't be changed. They're obvious. Jesus is God, died and rose again bodily. He's the only way to heaven. There's some things that are deal breakers. This is it. You're in or you're out.
Non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable. But there are times when we're not quite sure exactly. And at that point, God gives us this very dangerous gift called free will, where you can kind of choose, I'm not going to eat that. I don't believe that brings me closer to God. Okay, next guy. I am going to eat that, brings me closer to God. God says, okay. But I will tell you this, whatever you choose, stick to it. Because if you break even your own self-imposed expectation of holiness, I'm going to hold you to it. Because when Paul was, I can't, go eat of this. I can't eat that stuff. You told me in the Torah, I can't eat this. Oh, I tell you whatever you want. Just do it in moderation. Do it if it's good. And all things are okay for you, but they're not all prudent.
All things are permissible, not all things are profitable.
So, there's ways to observe how to go about things. And one thing I know for sure is this. I am supposed to be, as a Christian, the best citizen, the best neighbor, the best friend, the best worker. I'm supposed to set a standard by which people look at me like a freak. Who are you people? What are you people? I'm interested in this. I am supposed to be that guy. But any belief system, any philosophy, any mandate, any law that either breaks clearly God's law has to be abandoned. And the way that I see it is, or if it's clearly based on controlling my free agency given to me by God, it's sacred, towards a lie. If it's based on a lie, it should be ignored, abandoned, and despised. And that's what this corona was. They said it's the Black Plague. No, it's 99.78% survival rate. Not. Yeah, but people are dying. Yeah, they're with it. They got one lung. They're 78. They're obese. Yeah, killed them. Terrible. Terrible. You want me to put on a stinking mask to walk into the ICU? I'll put it on. They're in danger. Want me to put it on for the assisted living people that have the most? I'll put it on for them. I'm going to live my life with a risk that I choose to take. And I'm going to live it without you telling me what I have to inject into my body. And I didn't wear a mask from the get-go. I have tape of me walking through Chicago O'Hare Airport in 2020 when it was killing grandma if you didn't have a mask on, with no mask. Taping myself saying, folks, I want you to remember this, because everybody's got the mask. And I really believe this, Pastor, that somebody in that Chicago, right? But somebody there would go, dang it, he's right, and rip it off. Say, somebody's got to say no. We've got to draw a line in the sand and say, no more, no more. And nobody did. So you sat there in front of Christians or churchgoers and say, why did you make that decision? Was it based on truth or a lie? Was it based on fear? Because I tell you one thing, fear is a lie. Fear is a lie. They come up to a church, to a pastor, and say, close your doors. Why? Because you're unessential. What? What word did you use? You're unessential.
Not
okay, not only am I going to open my doors, I'm ripping it off the hinges. How dare you mock the living God? You know what we call this space you're in? Is that your building? This is called sanctuary for a reason. You don't want to come, don't. But it's here for those who are in desperate need of a sanctuary during this time of confusion. You didn't shut your doors in California What happened?
Well, it was during Holy Week, and the governor said the church was non-essential from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. And we did communion on Palm Sunday, but we followed CDC standards because at the time we didn't know the severity of the virus. I mean, we did, but, we were still kind of not sure if we could roll that out. We wanted to confirm some of the data because we had the Diamond Princess and everything else, and we had seen it. So, and we also knew that they were fudging the numbers with, like when I went before the judge on contempt charges, there were 109 deaths in our county attributed to COVID, of which only 2, because we had the FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, only 2 of them died from COVID. The others died with. The youngest victim in his 40s, and they put it on the front page of the Star and the whole bit, he had died of a drug overdose, but tested positive, so they called it a COVID death. And this is just endless. Another man in a car accident, crushed lungs, but he tested positive for COVID death. So it was just all drummed up. And the governor said that the church was non-essential. We did communion on that Palm Sunday. We followed CDC standards. The sanctuary holds 420. We had, 10 chairs, and we were wiping down, and they were coming. It took almost 4 hours to do communion. And the press descended on us like we were killing grandma. But to their credit, they said we were the cleanest place in all of California. And it was a national psychosis. I mean, they had everyone turning against everyone else. And had they said that the coronavirus could only affect you from the ground to 4 feet, they could have had the whole nation crawling. And we just weren't going to put up with it. So we put in ionization machines, UV lights in our air ducts, and we had hand sanitizer, and we broadcast an FM station in the parking lot. So if you don't want to come in, don't. If you want to wear a mask when you come in, go ahead. But we're going to be shoulder to shoulder because the governor marched in LA after the riots, where 75% of the businesses that were burned and looted were Jewish owned and targeted. He marched shoulder to shoulder, no mask. We knew at that point it was a big gimmick, and we opened up. And when they came after us and we went before the judge at a hearing, there are 2 eyewitnesses, and he should have shut the trial down for contempt because they perjured themselves. Both of these witnesses swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And they were talking about how they worked for the county as health officials, and they shared everything that was happening because they sat in the parking lot and they took pictures of congregants next to each other, not family. And this couple drove from the high desert and got there late, so they couldn't get into the sanctuary. So they parked in the parking lot, turned on the FM station. They parked right next to the Ventura County health officers. And they watched them wearing the mask, taking photos, writing copious notes, getting back in the car and taking off their mask and sitting in there together. And they took a picture. The following week, the same thing happened, and they took a picture. Two totally different. So there was 4 people that were no mask, sitting in a car together that weren't relatives. And they said, "So you follow these rules?" "Yes, I do." "You've never broken them?" "No, I haven't." "And is this you?" And you could have heard a pin drop. "Are you wearing a mask?" "No." Is that a relative?" "No, it is not." And the judge right then should have shut it down. But he was getting ready to retire. He wanted a drink with an umbrella on a beach somewhere. And all it requires is every person, it's just monumental cowardice. Everyone who can make a difference needs to. And for you to remain silent in your sphere of influence, whether it be not taking the shot because, and it's some of our first responders, those are the toughest ones because they were going to lose the most. For many of their colleagues, it was pensions over principle. But for some of these brave ones, it was principle over pension. And they stood. And I love it because it is a weeding out process. It's this highlighter where you get to just see the purity of the conviction to truth. And it's really a marvelous time to be alive. I've never been more excited in my life. I do believe there's an awakening and a revival going to happen. God's not finished with America. Pastors that are pushing eschatology and saying it's the end times, it may be, and I'm ready for his return right now. When he comes, he's going to find me busy because he said, "Occupy until I come, do business until I come." He's going to find me working. But the only reason why most of these pastors look at the geopolitical horizon is not to affect the ecclesia and change the culture. They look at it only to know the soon return of Christ. And that the Lord wants us, as Breitbart says, he said, politics is downstream from culture. But the church should be upstream and driving culture, which drives the political realm, because politics is the highest form of community. It combines morality with sociability. If God didn't intend us to be in politics, he would have never invented marriage. We have to get along. We have to figure out rules for the road and moral law, civil law. It's all critical. And the only ones capable of doing that are the beacons of liberty, pastors. It's you. And if you say that politics is in the Bible, the first 11 chapters of Genesis deals with a worldview that will establish every political argument. We're image bearers, creating the image of God, male and female. The Noahic covenant, 7 articles of how we operate in a civil government. Just go through those 11 chapters. And then look at the Tower of Babel, which is the first communist gathering to build a city that is void of God. And he scatters them. And people say, well, I've been called to make disciples. Yeah, but the verse says make disciples of all nations. Those are boundaries, borders, compacts, constitutions, ideologies. We'll be judged individually, but nations will be judged corporately for whether or not they allowed their citizens to have access to the living God.
Yeah, man. I mean, again, seriously, I mean, I've been saying a lot of these things, but I'm a comedian, so it's kind of like, well, he's got it clearly head issues, so we'll let him spout off. That's what they do. But to hear it from somebody who needs to say it and to be an inspiration as a pastor, I mean, I don't know. I don't mean it to sound gratuitous or whatever, but I'm just grateful because you have an authority you've been given as a pastor. You were called to be a pastor. I wasn't. I couldn't do it. If I was a pastor, the first 2 weeks, I'd either will have shot everybody or hung myself. That's what would have happened because I can't handle. I have a struggle. Maybe you can help with this. One of the things about Brad Stine Has Issues is that I speak about truth at all times and complete openness. I want real conversations with people being real. So one of my great challenges personally is anger and even to the point of rage, or has. Yeah. God is working through me, thank God, over the years. But it was unmanageable at times. And yet I also found myself at times, especially now, angry at the right things. And I've realized that there is a fine line, but a crucial line to be delineated because it's necessary. And that is the difference between uncontrollable, pride-driven, self-righteous anger, by which I'm judge and jury, and I get to make the call as to who deserves to be punished. And the most important element, and a crucial element, especially in this day and age, righteous indignation. Be angry. Just sin not. You can be angry without sin. So I know God called me to the church and to be a prophet to the church in this season. I didn't know exactly why, but it's becoming more and more clear as time goes by, because comics historically have been able to say whatever they want and not get their head cut off from the king. They were the ones that got to balance the peasants and the monarchy as one, because it was sort of this little, I don't know, this little sort of ruler in society that allowed us to sort of balance the powers for a second, even though it was all sort of superficial. The monarch always still won in the end. But we had a role, is what I'm getting at, as comics, as humorists, a way to communicate that brings laughter and oftentimes is able to circumvent their presuppositional defense to hear truth, because we all defend ourselves with our presuppositions and our worldview, especially when they are in conflict with what you have to say that I disagree with. So what I'd love to get from you as a pastor is, how does a Christian engage with righteous indignation, to get angry, to stand up at a school board and say, you're not going to push pornography on my children. You're not going to do it. You are not going to demand that I stick something of poison in my body. You will not demand that I cover my children. You're not doing it. And I have a God's authority to give me the permission to do this. Well, or is it just sort of my pride or my own anger or my own personal, I just don't want anybody to tell me what to do. So how do we find that balance? Because to be a warrior, you have to fight with virtue. You have to be, Augustine's just war theory talked about how war is essential because it brings order, and God is a God of order. So all war's purpose is to achieve peace, so we can go back to peace. It's unfortunate, but it's because we're a fallen world. War is inevitable in part of the system. Well, we're in a war now, a civil war that's more intellectual, philosophical. So how would you direct a parishioner or a fellow Christian or whatever to fight a virtuous war with passion and indignity about those things that are indignant, and not sort of somehow become sin-based? I don't know how easy it is to differentiate, but I'd love to get your thoughts on and your perspective on that as someone who fought the city and won.
Yeah. Well, I was the mayor of the city. I was a city councilman. I was a city councilman and a mayor. And I was elected duly to that office. The first time I won by 52 votes. The second time I won by a few thousand. And in the last 7 days of my term as mayor pro tem, there had been a shooting in our city, a mass shooting at a country western dance hall on college night, where 12 of our young people were killed by a homegrown gunman. 2 of them were from my congregation, and I was with every family that night when they were told that their child was one of the victims. It actually went into the morning. I'd been a sheriff's chaplain. I sat on a council with 4 other council members that were not of my political persuasion. I endeavored. I did good to those who spitefully used me. I treated them with respect and kindness. I live by the motto that people aren't the enemy, they're the opportunity. The anger of man does not accomplish the righteousness of God. It's a lot easier to get to a place of indignation where it's a justifiable anger, when in reality, why are you expressing that? Is that winning people? Because an offended brother is harder won than a fortified city. And to seek to build consensus in a community, people can't hear what you're saying because what you're doing speaks so loudly. And I just began to figure out how to navigate that. And on the night when that shooting occurred, I'm the only one who stayed that night. The others went home. And so when they had to do a press release, I told the mayor, who was a firefighter, and our city had been encircled by flames, and he was off fighting fires. He said, "Rob, you handle the press." So the public information officer of the sheriff's department and I went out, and cameras everywhere, national news. And I just began to say, "Folks, please pray evils visit our city." I used Christian terms. I was sincere. On 3 separate occasions, I watched the newscaster crying. And I sincerely, I would pray. I'd look at them with gratitude and thank them. And I say all that because when I stood, then I became mayor, and we had dedicated a park on the 1-year anniversary of the shooting. And I was beloved in the city. I was going to get reelected by a landslide. But I resigned from my seat to stand in opposition to the governor who said the church is not essential. It cost me something. I love my neighbor, and it cost me something. And they couldn't deny that. And I actually stepped down because I knew that the council would censure me, and they had enough on their plate with this stuff that the county and the state were dumping on them. And you know, that when I ran for office, I treated my opponent like they were, you know, I ran for assembly, and my opponent, she had been a council member, and my consultant said, you know, get ugly pictures and attack her and go after her and blah, blah, blah. I said, treat her like she's my wife. I want good pictures in there. I'm a Christian. I don't run a dirty campaign. Well, you're not going to win. I don't want to win if that's the cost of it, because she's in my community and I love my neighbor. And so I didn't win, but I ended up running for her seat that she vacated, and I won. And I became friends with her. And the idea is, a missionary goes where he's not loved but needed, and leaves when he's no longer needed but loved. And if everybody wants indignation and they want to be heard, why? Why? Is it, you know, I was an All-American water polo player and a nationally ranked swimmer, a scholarship to an NC2A Division I university, full ride. And the best coaches I've ever had were the ones who never had to yell. They just carried a gravitas about them. They just walked in, and the atmosphere in the room changed. You just knew that this guy, first of all, one coach was Michael Francis Troy, 2-time gold medal winner, broke his own world record 8 times, Navy SEAL 2 tours of Vietnam. When he walked on that pool deck, you just, yes, sir. Your reputation precedes you. And that's what I'd encourage folks to do. Just build that.
Well, so when it comes to, so you clearly were not happy with the way you were treated and the way that the religious community was treated during COVID and so forth. So what I'm guessing, I guess what maybe another way to frame this is, how does one as a Christian maintain an aggressive warrior posture, which sometimes has to occur? It's kind of like if you were being mugged, you're not going to find a Bible verse. You're going to defend yourself, I'm guessing. You're not a Mennonite or Mormon, but Amish, but
I went to a Mennonite Brethren seminary, but I'm not a pacifist.
Okay, you're right. Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. I mean, so anger, what does righteous indignation mean to you as a Christ follower, pastor, and a teacher, so that we can kind of understand?
I got the gist of what you're asking. There were times where I was really frustrated with some of the local pastors that we had already won the case. You can open your church and you're still not opening it. I'm watching Andy Stanley tell the world that the Old Testament's not necessary. We need to abandon it. Stuff like that frustrates me but that's going to be on his head. My job is to stand in opposition to that. Now, I can yell and scream and bark, and people know where I stand. I'm fervent about declaring the truth, and I would say that the times where you're looking at the landscape and you realize you're at battle, the greatest influence I've had is not by the raising of my voice, but by the willingness to lay it all on the line, no matter what. And then they say, wait a minute, he's serious. And I am. And then you need to be funny. Humor is so underrated. You were talking about you're a prophet. I believe comedians are prophets. And if they have a fear of God, they're a prophet. If they have a fear of man, they're a jester. They're a court jester.
Yeah.
But they can drive culture if they stand upon truth. And the beautiful thing is people laugh, it opens up their soul, and then you stick truth in there and shut it up. And they know that they've come face to face with reality. And that's what an awakening is. It's not living in your fantasy world. You've come face to face with reality, the inalienable rights, these laws of nature and nature's God. There's no getting around it. It doesn't matter if you're an atheist or an agnostic or a Christian. You're bound by the law of gravity. You can say it doesn't exist, but you're going to run off a cliff and die. We're bound by that. And good comedians, they just go right to the heart of the issue, make you laugh at yourself and this fake world you've established. They hit you with reality, and you have to, wow. And it causes you to think. But the court jester, they're not very good at what they do, but they live longer.
Yeah. Well, we're all made in the image of God, which means those things are innate to the human character.
Before I jump on your profession, let me say of my profession, and then I'll stand back. I'm called to be a shepherd, not a hireling. And a shepherd is one who has a fear of God. And then a fear of man is a snare. That's a hireling. I'm worried about the consequences of truth. So it's the same with comedians as it is with shepherds. And you are a prophet in a sense to the nations. And it's a profound gift, one that I envy.
Well,
best circumstance, best meaning possible.
No, and I appreciate that. I mean, everybody wants to feel like they have something to offer that people get some value from. I mean, just Amen. Like you enjoy pastoring because you know what you're calling, but certainly you want people to get something from your sermons. I mean, you're trying to be functional and valuable in the role you've been given. So, we never seem to respect our own gifts as much as others. I mean, if you look at a great pianist, you go, oh, if I could play the piano, and they're looking at you going, yeah, but you're a mechanic and you can pull an engine and do that. And you're going, well, that's easy. Just pull an engine, but playing piano, we forget that if you happen to be good at something, especially if it's a gift, it's just as amazing to other people, and they are envious of it because they consider it superior because it's not their gift. And a gift means you didn't earn this. You were given this thing that somebody else didn't get. We don't know why one guy can swim faster than another guy, but they simply can. Now, you still have to do the work and partner with God's giftedness to bring it to a higher level of perfection, but you either have certain gifts or you don't. So comedy, to me, I don't see it exactly like you do in the awe that so many people have over stand-up comic. And dude, I know actors. I'm an actor. I know musicians. I know lots of performance artists. I appreciate the artistic world. I love it. All of them, every time, by far, to a man, state that what they can't conceive of is a stand-up comic. They're just like, that's ridiculously beyond the scope.
You're laid bare.
Yeah. But here's what I'm getting at. I'm a stand-up comic. So I'm like, just do comedy. In other words, you don't put yourself in that category because you don't know any different. This happens to be something I can do. I enjoy it. But the biggest thing about comedy, stand-up comedy, because there's lots of funny people on this earth, but for them to turn around in front of strangers with a mic and say, now be funny, that's the hard part.
Come on, circus boy.
Yeah. And I would say that the great differential between funny people and a comic are, do you have the courage to stand in front of strangers who are, especially in the beginning, going to hate you because you're going to suck. And the number one fear of humanity is speaking in front of an audience because you don't want to be made to look foolish. You don't want to be made to look inane. But you're going to, because comedy is the only performance art I know of that you have to rehearse in front of the audience. Because you can't learn what a joke works until you get the rhythms in front of people who will tell you if it's funny or not. Yeah. And then you have to learn how to say, was it not funny, or wasn't funny because I didn't say it right, or should I change this one word, or should I pause one more second? Those nuances that you guys never see, that took months to make that two lines sound like this guy's just speaking off the cuff. Now, had to figure it out. Had to twist and tweak and work it out with fear and trembling.
Yeah.
How to do comedy. So there's value to it, but God laughs. And I believe that since I'm made in his image, then that's part of his character, laughter. It's an odd function of the human experience. We're the only creatures that laugh at jokes are humans, laugh at abstract, transcendent ideas. So clearly God must find a specific value in humor that has a power to be utilized in certain circumstances for some reason. Like you said, you can diffuse anger with laughter. You can be a shorter guy, smaller guy, but by making the big guy laugh, he suddenly wants to be your friend. So you can be used to sort of control and give yourself a power. But it also helps you to swallow the poison with a spoonful of sugar. It allows you to get to some really hard issues. And I think the people are desperate for the comics not to quit on this wokeism. Please continue to say the most outrageous. And by the way, I'm a First Amendment free speecher as a Christian. So I truly want people to be able to say anything they want. Yeah. Because that's the only way freedom can remain. It doesn't mean I'm going to like what they say, or I'm not even going to want to participate and listen. But I want them to have the option to put it out there if somebody wants to hear it. That, which I believe is also the same incredible the gift that God gives to humans when he states, I will allow you to choose hell. Because that's how much free speech means to me. Speak how you speak, say how you say, believe how you believe, choose how you choose to live your autonomous free agent life that I've given you. It's so precious. I'll even allow you to commit suicide to do it. And it's so there's something deeper. I think all things are deeper. I want to ask you one last question, Pastor. Thank you for your time. You're amazing. wonderful insights and beautiful, I'm sure, inspiring things for other pastors out there. Matter of fact, I'm going to ask you two questions.
All right.
First one is this. So, because this is part of a series, the warrior pastors, people who like yourself, who were in the middle of it and made those courageous choices. What would you say to pastors in the future when this happens again? But also, what would you say to the pastors who closed down, shut her down, locked them up, and probably for some are in deep shame and regret and wish they had done it differently? And now here they are. Some lost their churches. But for those who said, I screwed up, can we have a do-over? What would you say to them about how to proceed?
Romans 8:1. There's now therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Forgetting what is behind, the Apostle Paul said, forgetting what is behind, striving for what is ahead, taking hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of you. God has cast your sin, as the psalmist says, as far as the east is from the west, to be remembered no more. It's purposeful why he said that, because if you go from the North Pole and you hit the South Pole, then you're traveling north. But if you leave and you start traveling east, you never reach west. And that's how far God has cast your sin from you. And if we're faithful and just to confess our sins, he will cleanse us of all unrighteousness. And so I would just say to the pastors out there, a historical reference would be Martin Niemöller. He was alongside Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was one of the only good German pastors to come out of that whole misery, and actually was used. His life was tragic in that at the very close of World War II, one of the last directives of Adolf Hitler, before he shot Eva Braun and then shot himself in the bunker, was to make sure that Dietrich Bonhoeffer had been hung. Because it was Bonhoeffer and Martin Niemöller who, when Hitler addressed the churches and he was saying, I'll take care of your churches and your pensions, it was Bonhoeffer who said, I'm not concerned about my pension or the building. I'm concerned with the soul of Germany, at which point Hitler said, leave that to me. And those two men were a thorn in Hitler's side. For the pastors who folded and realized they did wrong, you are Martin Niemöller, who was a World War I submarine captain and sided with the fascist state of Nazi Germany until they came for the communists and he said nothing. They came for the socialists, he said nothing. They came for each member of society and he said nothing. And when they came for him, there was no one left. He's the one who wrote those words. But he realized he had made a mistake and then did a 180-degree of repentance and sided and stood with Martin Niemöller, and he actually, with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and he actually went to prison. He survived World War II. Bonhoeffer didn't. He became the mouthpiece for Bonhoeffer in many respects. And I would just say, you're like John Mark. The Apostle Paul didn't want anything to do with him, and Barnabas was related to him. And for Barnabas, it was always about the man. For Paul, it was always about the mission. But Barnabas believed in Paul when no one else would, and got him connected to the fellowship of this early church. And then Paul decides to, go off on John Mark because he abandoned one of the missions. And that's intolerable for Paul. He's put everything on the line. He didn't ask what the hotels were like. He checked to see what the prisons were like because he'd be kicked through the streets like a soccer ball. And he'd be whipped with a cat of nine tails. He'd be shipwrecked. He'd be bitten by a viper. He'd be stoned and left for dead. So he didn't have a lot of patience with this young guy, John Mark, bailing on a mission, but Barnabas never gave up on him. And then the last epistle Paul wrote, 2 Timothy, he's the final words of his life before he's to be beheaded. I don't know what that is. Oh, it's an alarm here. Sorry. The final words before he's to be beheaded, he says, get John Mark. He's useful to me. Pastors, if you didn't do it right the first time, it's okay. Don't double down on the stupidity. God has cleansed your failure. You're smarter. It's like the pilot who landed the wrong way at LAX and everyone called for his firing, and Japan Airlines said no, and they said, why not? And they said, he's the one pilot we know will never do that again.
Yeah.
So you guys are better equipped, and your humility is going to win the day. And I would just say, do it. We need you. I'm not standing in judgment of you. Welcome to the program. I'm thrilled to have you. And we needed you. We've always needed you. And I'm glad your eyes have been opened and there's an awakening in your heart. And now you're better equipped, and probably even more so than I am, because you've experienced, in a sense, shame, and then you have God's redemptive blessing upon your life. And you're, he who's been forgiven much loves much. So I'm ready for you guys to activate.
Yeah.
And for the pastors who are still doubling down in your stupidity, Romans 11, we're going to provoke you to jealousy, because our churches are going to grow and yours is going to shrink to a
Well,
minimum.
and they already did. I mean,
Yeah.
I believe that some of the churches that never recovered were weeded out. I mean, clearly God is doing a purge and finding the true believers. And he told me, I think I told you this once on the phone. He said, I want you to go to the church. There's too many churchgoers, not enough Christians. I need actual believers who are willing to pay whatever cost and speak whatever needs to be spoken of. Because if we don't do it, there's nobody left to say,
Right.
let me tell you what is actually true, so you guys can figure out what's going wrong. These poor, girls are getting mastectomies at 14. They're being mutilated, and they'll never get their lives them back.
Yep.
And instead of us going, let's help you, we want to offer, I know you're hurting.
Yeah.
But we want to offer you a way out, and this isn't it.
Yeah.
So we want to help you. But so when you live in a culture where the truth tellers aren't speaking the truth, then they're going to accept anything that comes down the pike. Like Chesterton said, when people abandon God, they don't believe in nothing. They believe in anything.
Yeah.
And
T.K.
so
Chesterton was awesome.
Yes. And so that's what makes it so many. I thought I was going to end on that question because it's so important for pastors, and I appreciate it, because they'll take it from an elder pastor who's been around to, you can give them the penance and you can give them the healing because they know you've been there. Hey, we all make mistakes, and some of us just screwed up. Sometimes it was out of cowardice. Okay, well then now you'll get strong. You won't do that again. So it's okay.
For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. If God kept a record of wrongs in my ministry, and I'm just, come on, pastors, we're all beggars, and I'm just showing other beggars where the food is.
Amen.
And let's get this done. We got work to do.
Well, I do have to ask this question only for you, because it'll be the last one, but
yes, sir.
Because I feel like it has to be addressed, especially because you're such an expert of our history, American history. It does matter to you. I've always said from the stage, I do not worship the United States of America. I worship God Almighty, but I'm grateful for the greatest nation in human history. So why wouldn't I defend it? This is a territory I was given. I was born here, not in North Korea. So this is the Christianity I have to fight for. And a First Amendment given to me to say that it was sacrosanct, that my religious liberties are the single most important freedom I have, because that's my conscience. So
Christian nationalism, is that the question?
Well, it isn't.
Oh,
it isn't,
okay.
Actually.
Sorry.
No, it's okay, but it can be tricky, and it shouldn't be. And there would have been time when it wouldn't have been, but it seems to be now, because sometimes we have weaponized even the ability to critically think about how one must go about defending oneself. So the Revolutionary War, and why the pastors, the Black Robe Regiment, stood up against the British and literally would drop their Bible, close it up, take off the robe, grab a musket, and fight with their men literally in the battlefield. We know about the Civil War and how we believe that to keep the Union intact and to end finally once and for all this slavery that we knew was screwed up from the get-go, and we didn't know how to do it. We kept kicking the can down the road. Well, the can is done. We have to fix this, or at least begin the process. World War I and II, and fascism, Nazism, communism, all the things that we as Christians took up arms and fought and shot other humans, and they're dead or were killed.
Yeah.
And we always saw that as honorable and part of the process. So what would you think would be, or do you think there could come a point in America, and I know it's going to sound controversial, where we would have to take up arms against a government which has gone totalitarian or rogue, or however you want to, because that's what the Second Amendment was put there for. We either believe it's there to defend us or not. But you're a pastor, you're a Christian, and you are scrutinized for these kind of questions, but they need to be asked. If it got to that place, when is it appropriate, in your opinion, or is it appropriate, in your opinion, for Christians in the United States to take up arms and go, I guess this is it. We're back into a civil war.
Yeah. Well, first of all, for those who would give me the moniker as a Christian nationalist, it's because, that I'm a Christian and I love my nation. Can a Christian not love two things? You say we can't love both God and mammon. Yeah, I'm not worshiping two gods. I'm worshiping one God in two places. I love this nation because it facilitates. You say that the gospel is the most important thing. The second most important thing is protecting the nation that protects the preaching of that gospel. 80 cents in every dollar in evangelism comes from the United States of America. America's faults, which are many, are universal. Her successes are unique. I love this nation. I love the freedom of this nation. 4% of the world's population, but it's responsible for more patents, Nobel Peace Prize winners, more symphonies, more accumulation of wealth than any other nation in the 6,000 years of recorded history. You ride in an elevator invented by an American. You enjoy air conditioning invented by an American. You fly in an airplane invented by an American. You enjoy the internet invented by an American, not Al Gore. All this because we have freedom. Yeah. All this because we have freedom. Canada has more natural resources and landmass, South America, but we've succeeded because we understand that we're accountable to God. Now, that being said, your question is the Second Amendment. The first one, the first 16 words are the most tortured. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Why? No government. Now our founders were very specific about this. They gave us 3 branches of government based on Isaiah 33:22. The Lord is our God. The Lord is our king, our lawgiver, and our judge. Executive, legislative, and judicial branch. The president would be appointed by the Electoral College. The Senate would be appointed by the Congress. The judiciary would be appointed by the president. But the lower house, the House of Representatives, would be duly elected by the sovereign of the nation, which is found in the first 3 words of the preamble, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. The only people we could elect was the lower house, our representatives. And that lower house controlled the purse strings. They had the money. They were the most powerful branch of government. And then with that, you look at the Declaration, or you look at the Declaration of Independence, it's poetic and beautiful. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary, and you see the preamble, the Constitution, it's just beautiful. But the first 16 words of the First Amendment are angry and prohibitive. Congress, you don't make any laws respecting the establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Nobody, including you, gets in the way of man worshiping God, ever. Because from that, logos, rational speech, comes truth. And you're not going to be the arbiters of truth. And to protect that freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of the pulpit, all that to pursue truth, to protect that, we're going to give them a gun. And you say, well, where's that in the scripture? A man who doesn't provide for his family is less than an infidel. That means their security as well. You come into my house uninvited with intentions to harm my family, you're going to get a high-speed lead infusion to your cranium, first to the chest, then to your head. It's, a Glock for the flock. Now, that's the last resort for me. I understand the seriousness of that. I don't take it lightly. But I'll tell you when we're going to go to guns. When the pulpits in America stop standing for truth and the people forbid to stand in opposition to tyranny. We have an opportunity right now, it's a revolution, but it's a bloodless one. And they will be defeated because there's more of us than there are of them. And our responsibility is to stand in opposition to that as best we can. And if we don't, we're going to end up being, this is not my phone, it's just driving me crazy. I don't know whose it is. We're going to end up being in a revolution that's bloody, and I hope not.
Yeah,
I'm a man of words, and the pen is more powerful than the sword, and the sword of Scripture, the word of truth, divides the thoughts and the intents of the heart. It's living, it's breathing. I'm hopeful for that. Honestly, I am. I don't want to go to war with other Americans.
No, we don't.
I mean, physical war.
No,
I want to go intellectually for sure.
None of us do, and I started saying on my podcast, it's like, I think we have to differentiate now between citizens of the United States and Americans.
Yeah,
All Americans are citizens, but clearly not all citizens are Americans anymore.
that's right. That's
Because
right.
to be an American, you have to stand for the principles and the foundations and the traditions by which it was created in the original intent of the Constitution by the founders. Yes, there's going to be a little tweak here and there just based on modernity, but the actual intent of what the principles were and what it was supposed to maintain is the only shot we have. And we can't keep this republic. I'm not even sure we are one now because I don't trust the voting anymore. And if we aren't voting, then we're no longer a republic because we're not controlling the outcome, which is what makes us the government. So that remains to be seen. But none of us want to.
There's always been dickering with the ballot box throughout American history, and there's going to be failures in the course of history. But
when those dickerings seem to come from outside sources that are probably Marxist, certainly, more of a world dominating, atheistic, postmodern cultural perspective, then it's much deeper than, the local mayor, stuffed the boxes or whatever.
The early church, I think it was Polycarp who said, we didn't know how to deal with Gnosticism because we didn't know what it was. Only until we were able to figure out what it was were we able to stop it.
Yeah,
I think that's true with America. We didn't know what critical race theory was. Frederick Marcuse and we didn't know who they were.
Yeah,
we didn't know that they had infiltrated all of higher learning and that they had. Yeah, we used to just say, the kids will go to school, they'll get a socialist teacher, but when they get into the workplace, they're going to change their political views. Well, they didn't. And now they sit as CEOs in companies.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and that's the point. I said to the people on my podcast, like I said, it's become a ministry. My whole thing, my whole life, my whole career has become a ministry, which I didn't expect. But I said, we need a militia. We're not going to win this nation and maintain it unless we have a militia. And I say, but I call it the militia of the mind. We're going to outthink these people. We're going to out-virtue these people. We're going to outstand these people. We are going to outflank them. Christians and conservatives have learned how to survive when we are censored and kicked off of platforms and our money is frozen. We've had to because we're the ones that are the only ones that had to endure this. So we're pretty good at figuring out back doors.
And the left doesn't understand humor.
No. That's their single thing. You'll hear it all the time. It's one of the biggest comments they throw at me is, well, this guy's not even funny. That shows you what conservative comedy is, Christian comedy. And it's like, well, first off, did you hear all the people laughing during me performing? So clearly it's not, am I funny? Of course I'm funny. I'm not funny to you. Yeah. And the reason I'm not funny to you is because you're a child. All leftism is childlike. It's systemic narcissism. And so they can't laugh at themselves because it means they have to expose their flaws. They don't think they're flawed. They think they're virtuous. They even think they're God. So I expose all that in my comedy. It's what my next album is created called Laugh While It's Legal. And I'm really trying to use that in churches.
Yeah.
People think I'm just a comic. I know you've known my career for a while, so you're a little different. But a lot of pastors just think, well, he's just a comedian. I said, no, I am a comic. There'll be laughter, but I stand for Judeo-Christian worldview as social commentary. No other Christian comic does that in the country. Still don't. And I also use it to teach and to inspire free speech, bold free speech, to not apologize, to not be frightened. I use the techniques of comedy and the giftedness of that to try to explain the idea of communicating truth and not be apologizing for or afraid of it or fearful of it. And so that's what he did for me. That's why he used me to do what I do. And it's why he used you to do what you do. You're not supposed to be me. I'm not supposed to be you. So that we need each other to come together as one body and fight like men. And that's what I so appreciate about what you do and your ministry. Thank you, Pastor, for your amazing Godspeak Church in Thousand Oaks. If you are in that area, trust me, go to this church. You will dig it. Just go visit and you'll probably stay because it's so important. And they're giving you life lessons on how to integrate your faith as a Christian into the culture, into your lifestyle, as it should have been from the very beginning. Discipline means you're a disciple. And this is what God expects from us. Listen, I'm just a comic that understands that cultural Marxism is cancer, needs to be destroyed. So political correctness, which is its mask, has been exposed. PC free is liberty, folks.
Amen.
And as I've said and will continue to say, all I'm doing is putting the woke back to sleep. This is God's Comic Brad Stine with Pastor Rob McCoy, fighting the good fight. God bless you, and see you next Monday, my friends.